feel a sense of urgency about the work. We're in the midst of a very significant police-community relations crisis, and a lot of people are hurting as a result of that. So we talk about de-escalation training, for example, and everyone is saying we need to train these officers in de-escalation. There was not one study in policing, this is in 2017, that showed whether or not de-escalation training was effective. Not one. But the researchers have to come in and build that body of evidence along the way. And so the whole rest of my career will be dedicated to doing exactly that.
Welcome to the Legacy Project. My name is Jim Copple, president of the Servant Forge Foundation. We're an organization committed to leadership development with a specific focus on service. This podcast and its related activities are about sharing the legacy we have inherited and discussing the legacy we still want to create. Legacy is more than cars, houses, boats, and material possessions that we want to leave to the next generation. Rather, legacy is about core values and beliefs that we inherited from a previous generation. They are the values that shaped us and defined us. Legacy is also about the values we develop or create that can be passed on or shared with the next generation. We will interview people from various backgrounds and walks of life. Some are famous, some, well, maybe not so famous, and others are simply our neighbors, our friends, people who live ordinary lives doing extraordinary things. Become part of this project by being intentional about legacy, more than just memories, but principles that have guided our lives and shaped our decisions. What is the legacy you choose to create? That's what we want to discover. Well, Robin, welcome to the Legacy Project and our podcast. We appreciate you taking the time. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And many of the people who listen to this podcast who come out of the criminal justice world or policing world will be thrilled to hear your story and the legacy that you've inherited. Robin Engel is the director. She's a professor at the University of Cincinnati in criminal justice, and she is the director of the, I'm going to mess this up, Robin, so you can clarify, for the Center for Policing Research and Policy at the University of Cincinnati. And I have to say, in the last 6 years of my career, I have facilitated 9 different task forces or commissions related to police reform. And invariably, the name of Robin Engel comes up in terms of research and research to practice. You're a true leader in this field and a thought leader, especially. And you understand rank and file officers as well as police leadership and what it takes to drive reform. So we're really honored to have you a part of this podcast, Robin. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. And just the fact that you've been on so many of these panels and commissions and had the opportunity to hear a little bit about my research is very flattering.
Well, I mostly facilitate, and I find myself becoming a subject matter expert by listening to everybody on these panels. But that aside, so Robin, where are you from? Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in a little town called Ovid. It's in the Finger Lakes in upstate New York. So a very small, rural, predominantly white and low-income community in the sticks, if you will. So country girl at heart.
Yeah. Siblings, brothers and sisters?
I do. I have an older brother. He's 6 years older than I am, and my sister is 2 years older than I am.
Mm-hmm. And so you graduated from high school in that community?
I did. I graduated from high school. And interestingly, of course, my brother and sister graduated just before me. I was the youngest, but neither of my parents had graduated from high school. So we were from a family that was very working class, doing our best, work hard and achieve great things, but also the expectation was that this next generation would do better and move things forward. And so I went off to college and then just kept on going.
Where did you go to school? Where did you go to college?
I went to the University at Albany, which is a state school in New York. I chose that school simply because it was what I could afford. I had to put myself through school. And that's where I ended up. Very proud to be an alumni there. As it turns out, they had the #2 school of criminal justice in the country. I did not know that going in. It was just a fluke that I ended up there. But once I did, it really fueled my passion and set the course for my career.
At what point did you decide you wanted to go into criminal justice? Was it?
Well, I was a sophomore, and I took an intro to criminal justice class. And that class was taught by Don Newman, who at the time I had no idea, but had been a pioneer in the beginning of the discipline of criminal justice. So it was an honor for me to even be in the class. But of course, I'm an undergraduate. I didn't know any better. I took this class, and one of the things we had, okay, now imagine reel-to-reel films. Do you remember those?
Yeah, I do.
Right?
I do.
Some of your listeners will not know what I'm talking about. But he put this film on, and it was a shoot, don't shoot simulator, if you will, in the early days. And you were supposed to clap your hand on the desk when you thought that the situation should invoke a response of an officer using their firearm. And I was just amazed. And what they would do is they would stop the reel-to-reel tape right when they heard the first clap in the class. Yeah. And then we would debate of whether or not that officer should have shot at that time, or that student in this case. And then they'd play the rest of the tape. And then we would see if we were right or wrong. And I thought in that instant, the power of that moment of making a life-altering decision. How is that officer trained? What information do they have going in? How do they make that decision? And what are the implications of that decision? And that was it. I was hooked. From that moment forward, I really wanted to understand police decision-making. And as an adult now, reflecting back, I think the reason I was so hooked was because of my own first interactions with police in my own home, and the decision-making that took place then, and better understanding how that shaped my life.
So say a little bit more about that, if you would. I mean, was your police often involved in your home life?
I wouldn't say routinely, but it was, I was in a troubled home. My father was an alcoholic and sometimes abusive when he drank too much. And so the police would be called to intervene in that domestic situation. And most of the time the police came in, my mom and the children were sent someplace else. We went to our grandmother's. My father would cool down, and the situation would never really resolve itself. It would just wait, it would be that moment was resolved, but the larger problem was not. And one day the officers were there, and I can remember I was just a little girl, and they decided that day that my father was going to be arrested. And that day changed my life. Had that officer not made that arrest, I think the pattern would have just continued in my life the way that had been previously. But instead, what happened was my father was arrested. He had to appear before the judge. He was given a stern reprimand and also told, you need to stop drinking. And if you don't, you're going to be right back here, and then you're going to serve time in jail. And so my life changed. My father, it was difficult, but he stopped drinking. He was less abusive, and I was able to grow up in then a violence-free home. It made all the difference for me. I was the youngest, so I had the most benefit of that. My brother, who was older, had already been through years and years of troubling situations. And I think the paths that we ended on were part of that, like being able to get out and go to college and have a very productive career, free of alcoholism and all these other things, I think was really that moment that officer made the decision to make an arrest in our home changed my life. And I thought, gosh, the power. Does that officer have any idea that if they had made a different decision that day, that it would have altered and changed the course of my life? And so how and why did that officer make that decision that day when all the previous officers made a different decision? I just wanted to know and learn and be a part of that so that we could change lives for the better.
Yeah. So, Robin, who are some of the influences in your life? I mean, teachers, coaches, parents, grandparents? Who helped shape who you became?
Well, most certainly my mother, who's
Mm.
probably the strongest woman I know, raising children in a troubled home. She worked hard and had a profound impact on my life. Really taught me to believe that women could do anything, that if you worked hard, that good things would come. And so she absolutely had a profound impact. Along the way, mostly it was teachers. I was fortunate to be put in gifted programs and in honors programs along the way, and had a whole bunch of teachers that really taught me to think about the world in a different way and to use the gifts that God gave me, right? My inherent intelligence in different ways than just typical take tests, regurgitate information back, but really think about things more holistically. And so that was a real benefit for me.
Mm-hmm. So your mother was a key influence. And then you stayed at the University of Albany. You did your doctoral work there as well. Is that right?
I did. I spent 2 days in law school. And on day three, you would accrue penalties for the loans that you had taken out. And of course, I'd already put myself through undergrad. So I already had student loans. And I had taken another large loan to pay for the first year of law school. And I was there 2 days and I felt like I didn't fit, that this wasn't really, I had that moment of, why am I doing this? This is not exactly what I want to do. I'm only interested in criminal law. And that's not the majority of folks around me don't have the same passions and interests that I do. And this is another huge financial commitment. And so in day three, that's when I knew I have to make this decision today. And I said, I'm dropping out and I'm going to figure out my life from there. Yeah. So I went back to my undergraduate advisor at the University of Albany. And I said, I always thought I wanted to go into law school. I don't think that's the right path for me. What should I do? And he said, well, next week we're starting our master's and doctoral program. And if you come here, we'll waive your tuition and we'll give you a stipend. Oh. I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to pay me to go to college? That was amazing to me. I thought, I didn't, and so I had absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. And so I said, sign me up. And I have been doing that work ever since.
It's interesting. I too was admitted to law school. And I can remember the day where I had to make a decision. I was either going to law school or going to seminary. And I wound up choosing seminary. Because I figured I could help people better in that career path. But now, given what I do, I sort of wish I'd gone to law school. But nonetheless, I can remember that decision point, thinking, am I going to be a lawyer or am I going to go on to seminary or in the ministry?
Well, I suspect you've helped people either way on the path that you've taken. So.
Well, I tell people, because I may have said this to you before, my doctoral work is in medieval church history, which I tell people helps me work with Congress. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, I can see where that would actually come in handy for you. Yeah.
So, Robin, you have a husband, children. How many kids do you have?
I do. I have an amazing husband. And I got to say, that was another one of my great life choices. Choose your partner well. I have a husband named John who has been so supportive of my career, of our family. I cannot say enough wonderful things about him. He also has a personality that's very even keel. He doesn't get rattled. I tend to be more emotional. I am, very passionate and fiery sometimes, and he tolerates, which is great. And I have 2 amazing children. In fact, my daughter is graduating from high school just this week. So that's really exciting for me. She'll be off to Cornell University next year to play volleyball. She's a volleyball player. And also, of course, for the great academics in that school. And my son is a sophomore. He'll be a rising junior now. And he's a basketball player. And so athletics is very important in our family. That's where we spend most of our time time. In fact, if you wanted to find me, it's on a court, a field, a gym, somewhere. Either watching, playing, yelling at refs, that's my life.
I'm kind of curious, in terms of the values you grew up with and the influence of your mother particularly, what values have you taken from that relationship and are now living it with your own children?
That's a great question. Well, certainly the work hard ethic.
Mhm.
My kids work very hard at school, at athletics. Nothing in life is worth doing unless you're going to do it passionately and with everything you've got. Right.
Mhm.
So in some sense, it's a very competitive household that way, but a healthy competitive in that, you work hard to achieve and then we celebrate your achievements.
Mhm.
So certainly we have that. But the other thing that is different about my household is the level of respect, mutual support, and love. And that was really important for me to bring into our household because my mother didn't have that in a marital partner. And I don't know how much of that she really received from us as children. So I wanted to change that dynamic. And that's very, very important in our household.
Mhm. So, obviously, being a researcher and a scientist that you are, you're a reader. Growing up, were there any books that were particularly influential in your life as you that
I don't know that there was any one single book, but I can tell you that when I was in grade school, the end of the year, you were allowed to sign out 10 library books for the summer, and then you'd have to bring them back to school in the fall. And every year I would beg, please, can I have more than 10 books?
Hmm.
Because I would go through those 10 books in the first 2 weeks. And then the whole rest of the summer, I wouldn't have any reading. And we were from a poor home. Education was not particularly stressed in my home. We were more about day-to-day living and getting through. So I would run out of books. And I remember, I can't remember what grade, but I do remember the teacher that wrote a note to the librarian and said, Robin can take out 20 books this year.
Hmm.
And that was such a big deal.
Yeah.
So, and I'm actually getting teared up thinking about it because education and the ability to read and expand your world for children that are in either troubled homes, low income homes, that is really the path. That's the way out. And so for my kids, we go to the store. My children were never denied a book, not once. We had hundreds of books and we gave them all away. As the kids got older, we would give those books away because I wanted to give that gift back to other children.
We're talking to Robin Engel, who is a professor of criminology at the University of Cincinnati, and so much more. She's a major influence and researcher in police reform, and we're glad to have her on board. Robin, I want to ask you in terms of this is sort of symbolic, but we all have things in our lives or our family. I don't know if you ever saw the movie. It was a romantic comedy called Leap Year. And in that movie, the ingenue is asked by a suitor, if you had one thing in your house, if your house caught on fire and you wanted to grab one thing, what would you grab, excluding pets and family? What one thing would you grab in your life that symbolizes where you came from and who you are?
Wow, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
Excluding
Family and pets.
Family and pets are
Yeah.
out. I I would grab my external hard drive because it has my life's work, but it also has my life's memories.
Uh-huh.
I have all of my pictures there,
Yeah.
and I would want those memories.
Yeah.
So I would grab the external hard drive.
Yeah, I have my father was decorated in the Second World War, and I highly respect his service. And he gave me, as a young child, a medic's box. he was actually in the Philippines, and he had grabbed this box. He rescued somebody, and this had all the medical supplies in it. And he gave me that box, and I keep all my important memorabilia in that box. And that would be the thing I would cry.
Yeah, so you get them. So you're organized enough that you've put everything in one place so that you can grab the whole thing.
So I am going to rethink the hard drive. That may be my better choice if I was given that option.
Well, it's funny too, because I'm sure some of your listeners are like, "Why isn't that stored on the cloud? Like, why does she have it? Like, is she that archaic now?"
Right.
There's places we can store those things, not in your home. Exactly. Okay.
Robin, did I understand, or am I confusing you with somebody else, that you actually have Native American background?
I do.
Yeah.
My father was possibly a quarter, maybe a half. Mm-hmm. I don't know a lot about my father's family. He grew up incredibly poor in he called them the hills of Pennsylvania, mm-hmm. somewhere in the region of Johnstown, although I don't know. His parents, my grandparents, died. One died before I was born, and one died when I was a baby. So I never got to go to see his hometown. But he quit school in the 8th grade and went to work in the mines, in the coal mines. And it wasn't until his death that we realized he served in the military. He was in the Air Force. And it wasn't until his death that we got some of his paperwork back, and we realized that he had actually lied about his age to get into the military early. He went when he was 17. And I suspect to kind of get out of that life. He met my mother later when he was stationed in upstate New York. There used to be an Air Force base there, and that's where they met later. But I know that he had Native American. I don't know how much. It was his father's side, I believe. And I think my grandfather would have been close to, I believe he was full Native American, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So let me ask you, in terms of the work that you do, the values that you inherited, obviously hard work and discipline. Why, and this is the why question, why do you engage so passionately and so rigorously in this space around policing, police reform, criminal justice reform? Understand the experience you had in college, but why do you continue to do this? What drives you?
I want to save lives. Mm-hmm. And, doctors save lives every day. They're there. They have that power and that ability and that skill set. And our first responders save lives every day. So as a researcher, how are you going to save lives? Or significantly alter and change lives for the better. And I do that both through research and through my ability as an educator. So with the research piece, what really drives me is bringing data-driven, scientific, evidence-based approaches to law enforcement so that they can make better informed decisions, so that they can reduce violence in communities, make police-citizen encounters safer. All of my research is designed to do specifically that, to give officers better tools, techniques, and strategies to reduce harm in communities and to make police-citizen encounters safer. So that's the one side, the research side. The teaching side for me is really about educating the next generation to continue the work. Because most of these strategies and a lot of police reform tends to be check the box reform, right? Like whatever political cycle we're in, that's what we're doing at the time. And nobody's really thinking long term. How do we holistically change to make our communities safer and better for all? And I know it's going to take the next generation to continue the work. So that's where the education and the teaching components comes in. And also for me, education was my way out of my own personal circumstances into a better pathway and a better life. And if I can provide that to somebody else, get them passionate about learning, about engaging, working in communities, working with law enforcement, then I want to do that so that we can continue the work beyond what I'm doing.
So as a researcher, as somebody who trains and teaches and all the different platforms that are yours, how how explicit is that value? How do you talk about that value in terms of saving lives as
All the
being
time.
all the time?
All
Is
the
it?
time.
Mhm.
We, as a research team, and I have a team of really talented doctoral students, postdoctoral students, or postdocs, and also young professionals that are in this research space. And we talk about that every week. We reiterate that our role, that our work is guided by making police citizen encounter safer and reducing harm in communities. And so we judge which projects we take in, what external funding we seek out for our research, which agencies we're working with, all with that lens. We talk about it a lot.
Mm. So it's a part of who you are.
Yeah, and
So,
you know where that really came from? I'll tell you.
yeah.
When I first moved to Cincinnati, it was 2000. I think it was. Well, let's see. I was very pregnant at the time, so 2002 is when we moved here. But 2005 is when I started working with the Cincinnati Police Department, and in 2007 we'd had this uptick in violence in the city, and in 2007 we started a new violence reduction strategy. We called it SERVE, and it was CIRV, Cincinnati Initiative to Reduce Violence, and that was such a large, comprehensive project. It involved the community, it involved police executives and political leadership and consultants from Procter and Gamble even. We did so much work and we saved lives. And that was the first time I realized I was speaking to city council. And I put up my charts about the number of gang member involved homicides in the city and number of shootings. And I started to speak, and then I recognized, each one of these numbers is a person. Somebody lost somebody, somebody was injured, somebody's family. Every number represents a person. And so I took a moment in front of city council and I said, I just want to recognize that I go right into the statistics and I talk about numbers because I'm a researcher and that's what I do. But every one of these numbers is a person. And every number that's not up there is a person. And we had a 43% reduction, 42 to 43% reduction in gang member involved homicides. And we were able to sustain that over a number of years. And the numbers that weren't on the chart, right? Those are also the lives, and we don't know whose lives they are. We don't know where that happened or whose lives we changed, working collectively in a holistic way to reduce violence, but we did it. And that was so powerful. That really gave me energy and enthusiasm for the work, and that we needed to work even harder and even faster to keep this work going.
Mm. That's an important value. It's important. And related to this is, and my next question has several tributaries to it, but you may have read at some point Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
I actually met him.
Oh, you did? Yes, because
I did.
he worked, or the Covey Institute worked in police reform, or is trained in police reform. And it was one of those books that I read on airplanes, and I lost 3 copies of the book before I finally got through it. But the second habit, he talks about living with the end in mind, and he has you imagine attending your own funeral today. What would people say about you? And then he asks you, if they could attend your funeral 10 years from now, what would you want people to say about you? So when it's all said and done, and after all your work, your publications, and everything you've contributed, what do you want people to say about Robin Engel?
First, I'd like them to know that I hope they would say that I was a great mother. Mm-hmm. That's the very first and most important role in my life. And after that, I would hope that they would say that I had a significant impact on communities and that I helped police agencies across the country and around the world to be better, and to help to continue to reduce harm in communities and make police citizen encounters safer. That's what all of the work and all of the passion is about. And if I could leave a mark in that police agencies became better organizations at meeting their own goals, that would be enough for me.
Yeah. What would you like your children to say about you?
I'd like them to say I was a great mother. I would like them to say that the times when I missed events or a game or something that was important to them, that there was a larger purpose for that sacrifice for them, for not having me there. As a working mother, you're always balancing, right? I have this really amazing career, and I've been very fortunate. And I have this really amazing family, and I've been very fortunate. But sometimes either one has to give a little. And so I would hope that my children would recognize the importance of my work and that they were part of that work because of the sacrifices they gave as well.
Well, my last question, and I really appreciate the time you've taken. This has been rich. And you may have already answered this in part, but part of what we challenge in the Legacy Project, when we first started this, I was saying it was my generation, the baby boomers, I'd be talking because, we're at that stage where we're starting to think about what we're leaving behind and what values that we have and what possessions we have. But I've discovered in this project that there are a lot of young people who are beginning to reflect on the legacy they want to create. And that they should be thinking about the legacy they want to create. That should be intentional in terms of their decision making. They don't see death or the end of life as imminent necessarily, but they are thinking more about what it is to be intentional about what they want to create. In your life, what legacy would you still like to create? In terms of your goals, the future. We've talked about the contribution you've made, the influences in your life, but you're relatively young. And so what is the legacy you would still like to create?
Well, that's a great question. And so I'll talk about it first professionally and then personally. Professionally, I feel a sense of urgency about the work. We're in the midst of a very significant police community relations crisis, and a lot of people are hurting as a result of that. And so, we had an officer-involved shooting in 2015 at the University of Cincinnati. Samuel DuBose was shot and killed. He was unarmed. It was during a minor traffic stop, and a University of Cincinnati police officer, within seconds after that stop, used his firearm and killed him instantly. Right after that, the university administration came to me and they said, you're our police expert, our consultant, you go around the world, what do we need to do? And so I devised for them a short-term plan and a long-term plan for police reform. And they said, great, we want you to do that. And I said, oh, no, you don't understand. I'm a consultant. I tell people what to do and then I go home. I don't actually do the work. And, but within a few hours, I was made vice president for safety and reform. And I found myself as the first person that I knew as a researcher that had taken over essentially a police department and became a police executive of sorts, right? An administrator where the police department was reporting up through me. And I was now in charge of making decisions on that police reform that I had been calling for. And I thought, that's okay, I've got this because I'm a researcher. I'm going to go to the body of research and evidence and see how can we change policies on use of force and new training for cops and what do we need to do? I went to the evidence, Jim, and there was nothing. So we talk about de-escalation training, for example, and everyone is saying we need to train these officers in de-escalation. There was not one study in policing, this is in 2017, not one study in policing that showed whether or not de-escalation training was effective. Not one. Right now, we have one study that shows that de-escalation training can have impact on officer behavior by reducing the use of force, reducing citizen and officer injuries. That study is by my research team. And the reason we did that study is because I did not want another police executive to be in the position that I was in. And that was making decisions blindly with no evidence base to support the decisions that have to be made immediately, right? We can't wait for research. We have to make those decisions. But the researchers have to come in and build that body of evidence along the way. And so the whole rest of my career will be dedicated to doing exactly that, building that body of evidence so that police executives can make better decisions and are not making decisions about really important things like training and policy and strategies without having something to go on.
What about the family side in terms of the legacy?
So the legacy for my family, oh gosh, I hope that both of my children really take on whatever they want to do and just be passionate about it and be driven and have the happiness that I have found being involved in a profession that really drives me. Personally, the legacy I want to bring is that I took this family out of a cycle of violence. I broke that link. And so that my children moving forward will make good choices about their marital partners, will make good choices for their children, and that cycle was broken and I broke it.
That is a great legacy. That's a powerful legacy. We've been talking with Robin Engel, who is a professor of criminology at the University of Cincinnati and directs the Center on Policing Research and Policy, works with the International Association of Chiefs of Police. She's made an amazing contribution to the field, and you've made an amazing contribution in life. And so thank you, Robin, for being a part of the Legacy Project.
Well, thank you. This is really just so wonderful to be a part of it. Thank you. And thank you for what you do. This is really important.
Well, thanks. To find out more information about this conversation and other Legacy podcast episodes, go to servantforge.org. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and consider leaving us a review. We want to hear from you. We want to get your ideas and your opinions. I have a new book that corresponds with the Legacy Project titled The Seeker, Bring Me the Horizon. You can find a copy of it on Amazon or your preferred book distributor. The book corresponds closely with these podcasts. The podcast episode was produced by Matt Erickson and edited by Carissa Erickson. The music is by David Hyde. Please look for a new episode of our podcast coming out soon. Remember, you have inherited a great legacy. You have an opportunity to create a great legacy. Engage your past to build a future.